I'm JD. I'm the chief learning architect at a learning technology company called Exonify and founder and principal of LearnGeek. And I am here to answer. Oh, thank you for the. Oh, you don't have to. You don't have to. I have sound effects. Get ready for this. But anyway, I'm here to answer the most popular question that will be asked over the next hour. Where are the slides? The slides are there. So I dropped a link in the chat. I'm just going to link bomb the chat for a minute before we even get started in the conversation, that the slides are available at that link. And then the hype cycle thing I'm going to talk about, you don't even know what that is yet, is available at that link. And then if you want to grab the report that I'm going to mention from Red Thread Research, it's available at that link. I have all types of links to share during the presentation. But thanks for joining me today to talk about technology, but not just technology. We're talking about the mindset that the way we should be thinking about technology, given the changing relationship people have at work when it comes to technology, and the changing relationship between learning and development and the digital side of what we do, especially over the past 2 years. You know what I'm talking about. I don't have to talk about that a lot. But before we dive into like digital strategy conversations and talk about our new digital face, you've all found the chat, which is awesome. I have an important question to ask you. I've answered yours. Where are the slides? Link provided. I have a question for you. The question is, oh, by the way, I live in Orlando and I spent 10 years working for Disney. So that's where this question comes from. Which piece of Disney technology would you most like to get your hands on? You have three options. Would you prefer Baymax, Doug's collar from Up, or a portal to anywhere you want to go, like the Monsters Inc. door? So in the chat, which piece of Disney technology would you prefer? Healthcare companion, Baymax. Doug's collar, you can put on anyone or anything if you've got a pet cat. Cat is thinking, or you've got a portal, you can go anywhere. You've got the doors from Monsters Inc. It's a highly contentious question. I see a lot more portals. I've been having this conversation with people over the past couple of days, and most people are collar. Very interesting. Actually, a 30-minute conversation about, how did the monsters figure out the children's screams were a source of energy? Well, they must have figured out the door, portal, technology, and then stumbled upon. These are the conversations you have with people who used to work at Disney. So I'll reveal my answer in today's conversation. But I'm going to put this visual on screen for no particular reason. If anyone knows why this is on screen, you know why. If you don't know why it's on screen, you're not participating in that particular activity. But this is on screen for the moment. Moving forward, I want to come at technology today from a particular perspective. That technology is about as an enabler. It's not a solution unto itself. And when I say technology and learning and development, there's a wide variety. So I'm going to dive into a concept I was talking about. There's so many different technologies. When we talk about digital learning, what does that mean? All the different types of technology we use in our work every day. So this is actually something I put together on an annual basis called the LearnGeek Hype Cycle. So what I try to do is I try to chart across all of the different big conversations in learning and development. How are we progressing as a profession? Kind of where are we? It's inspired by the Gartner Hype Cycle. How mature are we and the various practices that we're applying every day in learning and development. And you see a wide variety of different types of topics discussed on this particular hype cycle. I shared the link in the chat already. You can find it on my website, learngeek.co. But here, you'll notice I narrowed down to different types of technologies. So everything from mobile to AI to blockchain and 5G. And it gives you a bit of a snapshot of where we are as a profession when it comes to our overall digital maturity. But then I'm going to zoom in a little bit more to specifically digital learning. And right now, I believe that in learning and development at large, we're facing a bit of hard reality when it comes to the way that we apply technology to enable learning and performance. And if you've heard of the words Zoom fatigue or any of the other things that are challenging us when it comes to using technology to effectively enable performance at work, there's a wide variety of challenges being faced out there today. But what's interesting is that when you look at the hype cycle from 2019, I actually slid digital learning backwards down the slope between 2019 and 2022. So I actually think we're less further along today when it comes to the way we apply technology to support learning and development at work than we were a couple of years ago. But it's by no fault of our own in this case. It's because the context radically changed. If you look at the ATD 2021 State of the Industry report, it shows that 80% of formal learning hours were delivered via technology in 2020, up from 56% in 2019. So we're already more than half digital, if you say, and the nature of the challenges we've been facing as a world pushed us to kind of adopt a digital face into 2020 and since then, given people going remote, working from home, and those types of ideas. And we've seen headlines come out. Things like workers finally managed to identify the learning management system. And we've seen people talk about how many more logins they're seeing, how many more hours of training are being completed via the learning management system, how much more mobile technology is being adopted. But the question becomes why, right? I think we have to stay grounded in the reasons we're seeing these transitions. And this information from Brandon Hall Group shows that as we've shifted formats or shifted modalities in the face of the pandemic, a lot of the same tactics are still being used, but they're simply being ported over to technology. We've taken our most familiar delivery format, the classroom or instructor-led experience, and it's changed from looking something like this to looking a little more like this. So my hypothesis or my position when it comes to digital strategy and L&D today at large, and of course, every organization's in a different place, but I believe that workplace learning has not transformed as a result of technology of the past couple of years. It moved. We took a similar mindset and similar modalities and applied it via technology because that's what we had to do, right? That's what was required of us just to keep things moving along. But now at this point, hopefully what we're doing and what we need to do is look back, look at what we've learned over the last couple of years and look at what technology is capable of and ask the question, are we reimagining our practices through a digital lens? And there's plenty of data out there that says this is still a gap for us, given that you see executives, as an example, saying that they recognize more and more the importance of skill, the importance of learning and development at work, but there's a considerable gap when it comes to people's readiness to be able to adopt new practices, to be able to apply new skills on the job. And then there's also data out there that says upskilling and reskilling opportunities actually declined over the past couple of years. So while we've seen more access, right, people completing more courses, those types of ideas, the opportunity to develop yourself to build the new skills that are going to help you be successful as organizations change has actually declined. So that then begs the question, what do we have to do to think differently about the way that we use technology? Right? How can we advance our practices and take advantage of everything we know and everything we have available to us? And for me, it comes back to a kind of a fundamental question. Why do we use technology to begin with? What's the value of a digitally enabled learning and performance strategy? So that's what I want to kind of dive into today is why should we be thinking about the way that or why do we use technology? How should we be thinking about that? And then how should that inform our strategy moving forward as we look to make technology decisions? Whether you're searching for a learning platform, you have plenty of learning technology, and you're trying to figure out how to use it, how should our mindset change to inform a successful digital strategy, to close those opportunity gaps and make sure that people are building the right skills in a digitally enabled way? So why do people use technology in workplace learning? In my experience, it comes down to three primary reasons. The first is speed, right? Through technology, you can get information, get coursework, get concepts out to your audience faster than if you had to sit everyone into a room or fly trainers around to different locations. Since e-learning was introduced and computer-based training was introduced, it's accelerated our ability to reach an audience. We can move faster through technology. The second one is scale. So instead of having one classroom trainer go around to individual sessions and then reach as many people as they can with the number of hours they have available, I can talk to as many people as can hear me despite any technology. It's always funny when you have tech challenges in a tech session at a tech conference, isn't it? But anyway, meta. So it allows us to reach a much larger scale at a greater speed. And it helps us solve the this is how you do it here problem by making sure everyone gets the same content experience, completes the same course. So instead of different trainers delivering different sessions different ways, we now have the same execution, and we know that everyone's receiving the same message. So those are the three kind of fundamental ideas I still see at the root of most digital training strategies. Something I didn't mention in the beginning because we were trying to figure out the whole microphone camera thing. Hopefully I'm okay. Hopefully I'm a little better right now. Or if I'm not, you've jumped to another session. You're not here, you can't hear me. But if you're still here, thanks for hanging out with me. But one of the things I didn't mention in the beginning is in the work I do at Axonify, I work with a lot of organizations from a frontline technology perspective. So I go into large enterprises and talk about how do we position different types of tools to meet the needs of different audiences? And how should that then inform our overall ecosystem strategy? Everyone's saying I'm great. Keep just compliments in the chat are good. I'm just going to sit and see people telling me I'm good. You stopped. Okay, I understand what you're saying here. So that's the perspective I'm coming at to this conversation with. So when we look at these three fundamental ideas of why do we use technology and how do these principles inform our strategy, there's again a gap. When you look at engagement across the learning technology space, there isn't a lot of great data there from different platforms and providers. But what I've anecdotally found is that generally speaking, about 20% of employees consistently walk through the digital doors that we provide. So whether that's your learning management system, a learning experience platform, while we see spikes in engagement, in the last 2 years, or maybe during required training or particular initiatives, on average, about 20% of people are regularly using the technology solutions that we provide. But here's the problem that we have to face now. Over the last 2 years, we have learned something important about our organizations, is that all of those red tape issues, all of the things that were stopping us from doing things like working from home, because that wasn't possible with the technology we have, all of that is gone, right? We can't go back. As organizations, we've recognized how fast we're able to adapt, and we've, again, learned something about the way that technology relates to the nature of work. So as learning and development, we have to look at that same reality, just like everyone else in our organizations, right? Whether it be IT, operations teams, there's no going back. People aren't going to forget what we were digitally enabled to do. If you were suddenly able to deliver a course online much faster to a larger audience, your stakeholders are not going to suddenly revert backwards to say, yeah, do it slower in the classrooms next time, right? We can't go back. The proverbial cat is out of the bag. I just wanted to put a cat on screen, but you get the metaphor. So it's a one-way street we're moving down now when it comes to advancing our digital capabilities to meet not just the speed, scale, and consistency considerations, but really take that next step forward when it comes to how we apply technology. So as is true of everything that I talk about, it all comes down to the way we think about the work that we do, what is the role of learning and development, and then how that is applied in the different modalities, tactics, and tools that we implement within our organizations. So before we go into, well, how do we close those gaps? How do we get more people engaging in the right types of digital experiences? We have to sit back and say, well, what mindset should we be applying? And I often talk about the modern learning organization mindset. How we as learning and development professionals and how the stakeholders we work with, how the employees that we support, how we need people thinking about the connection between learning and work in order to make any advanced practices make sense. So that begins with learning being a critical part of work, not just the workflow. At TK in the last couple of days, you've probably heard people say the words workflow learning, learning in the flow of work. It's a great bingo piece if you want to play a game. I think we have to go a step beyond that and have people thinking about the connection between learning and work. Because even if you make stuff available in the flow of work, it doesn't mean people have time. It doesn't mean learning's prioritized the same way work is prioritized. So for me, it's about making learning part of work. Taking advantage of more than just what we own, right? A learning technology technology doesn't have to be called a learning technology to support learning. It doesn't have to be owned by the L&D team in order to help people do their jobs better. We have to think more broadly before we go anywhere near a technology strategy about what our ecosystem really is made up of. So take an ecosystem approach. I'm going to say the word ecosystem several times. Think about data. How does data feed into and inform our technology strategy so we can make better decisions more quickly? Make sure we're meeting personal needs. A lot of the organizations I work with have L&D teams of 40 people supporting 400,000 employees. So when you're thinking about a digital strategy, technology is a critical enabler to help us reach people with what they need, because there's no way that an L&D team of one person can meet the individual needs of 2,000 people without the right type of infrastructure to help them out. It's about impact, not just delivering content. And that's where I think one of the big kind of gaps over the last 2 years is that we've seen learning technology providers say, well, across our customer base, we've seen 500% more logins, and they've completed thousands more courses. But did it help? Were people able to do their jobs better? And as a result, did the organization see better results? That's where the focus of our digital strategy needs to be. And finally, all of this is about making our organizations more agile. I have other conversations about the connection between learning and disruption. And I don't know if you can see on this camera, but in the background, there's a visual or a sign that says the two most important words in learning and development today are disruption and opportunity. And there's no way to become future-proof or disruption-proof as an organization. But if we install the right tools and tactics, the right mechanisms, we can become disruption ready, because we have an infrastructure in place that helps us adapt, helps us bend, helps us meet the changing needs of an organization. And you've seen that over the past 2 years with the tactics and tools that just happened to be there and became that much more valuable to you as organizations change, as people move to working in hybrid roles. Whatever challenge you've faced that was unique to the disruption you've seen recently, we've learned what agility can really mean in an organization. How do we build that up so that when the next challenge comes, we're equally as ready? And I often come back to the best really source of inspiration for me when it comes to digital learning strategy is consumer technology, the technology we use in our everyday lives. I often relate the work that I do to my phone. That is my phone screen, by the way. Feel free to judge me for my application selections. But in this case, it comes down to the fact that the people we're supporting also have that phone. Probably not as good apps, but they have that phone as well. They know what technology looks and feels like every day. They use it to solve problems every day. That's the bar. So when I build a technology solution or implement a technology strategy in an organization, the bar isn't enterprise experience. The bar is consumer experience. Because if it doesn't feel like what technology feels like every day, or frankly, my version of technology work, because I'm using my phone on the job, not just the tools that people are handing to me, like I'm going to feel a disconnect. I'm going to disengage. I'm going to go looking for an alternative option. And it's not just the employees that use technology differently or may go looking somewhere else. It's your stakeholders too, because they know what technology should feel like, what looking up information should feel like, what watching a video on YouTube should feel like. So how do we get closer to that reality and take advantage of what technology is really capable of, but apply it for what we're trying to do in terms of workplace learning and performance? Thanks for the reactions, everybody. I'm glad you're still here. So what are the 4 other reasons, the 4 other principles we should be thinking about? Beyond speed, scale, and consistency, there are 4 other boxes that your digital strategy should be checking in order to be considered really a modern learning technology ecosystem. The first one is context. Technology helps us overcome the hurdle that is the separation between learning and performance. And again, you've heard people talk about the idea of learning in the flow of work ad nauseum for a while at this point. But I think there's an important consideration here to think about, is that these 3 gentlemen on screen, they may work at the same company. They have the same ID badge with the same logo on it, paycheck signed by the same person. But when they go to work, they go to 3 very different realities. Maybe one person's working in a hybrid role, sitting at home like I am under unnecessarily bright lights. One gentleman's working in a logistics facility, delivering product, moving product out to stores. The other person's working in the store. Their day-to-day reality is fundamentally different. So learning in the flow of work means something different because they use different tools, they have different experiences. And the big point I'd like to make is that knowledge and skill requirements are based on what you do, but how you learn is influenced by how you work. Because these 3 gentlemen may share some common skill requirements, right? They all have to be great communicators in the work that they do. But how they learn to become a great communicator is going to be meaningfully different because of how they spend their time every day. The gentleman on the left may get to decide to come to a session and hang out with fun folks like us. The gentleman on the right probably doesn't get to make that decision because he's focused on guests in the store every day. So that's why before you can build a modern digital strategy, you have to think about the persona of the audience or audiences you're working with. And persona is another hot button word. We like to talk about personas. And the way we think about design thinking and all these different types of ideas. But it's a critical part of making decisions when it comes to technology at work as well. So here on screen are just a set of different persona considerations or questions that I like to ask when I'm working with an organization to shape a digital strategy. A couple of the key ones are time, right? Does this person control their schedule, or is their workflow heavily managed? Where do they spend their time at work? Access. What tools does this person use at work? Are they using a handheld device and that's their computer? Are they using a laptop that they carry around with them? Are they using personal devices for different reasons? I need to understand these factors about the audience or audiences that I support before I can decide what's the right digital experience to help them do their jobs better. And the key consideration there is as well is that you're likely not supporting one persona unless your team is laser focused on one particular division or department. If you're an enterprise learning and development team, you're supporting multiple different personas that may share common attributes, but may also have very different motivations, very different ways they're measured, work at very different scales, come in with different foundational knowledge. So we have to have the personas nailed down to understand the context in which any solution we provide is going to be used. If we want to achieve learning, not just in the flow of work, but learning as part of work, personas is where the conversation begins. The next piece is connection. How do we leverage technology to break down the walls that we see forming actually increasingly with organizations right now? If you look at any research around hybrid work or remote work, working from home, or if you work from home, you might be experiencing the fact that it's getting harder to connect not just to individuals, but with the organization at large. And technology that's often built to help us share information more effectively, in many cases actually makes it harder to connect with the bigger picture of what we're working with or across silos with people that we maybe don't work with on a regular basis. So we have to be using connection, not just to individuals, but to the broader organization as a lens when we're making technology decisions. The next one I already talked a lot about is personalization. It's not enough to scale a solution, right? You can get one course delivered to 100,000 people via your learning management system. That is good. But all of those people probably don't need that particular solution at that time because everyone comes into our organizations with different levels of capability when it comes to different topics. Even these two people who work in the same job, one having a jaunty mustache, come in at different levels, and our desire is to get them to sustain capability. And the reality is they're going to move at different paces because everyone learns and develops in different ways. So we have to find the way to use technology to scale a personalized experience. And we're not going to go deep into this today because they didn't give me 7 hours to talk to you. Be thankful for that. The key to that is data. Thinking differently, and finally solving our measurement problem, because there is no way to get to a personalized experience at scale unless we measure the experience of learning and performance at work effectively. So if you go to my website, the learngeek.co/presentations that I shared earlier, and we'll share again in the chat because we've been so vibrant today, the link is way up top. I'll share it again later. You'll find different content that I've put together about data and measurement as well. But if you're thinking about why should we prioritize fixing the learning measurement problem, getting past the vaunted level 2, right? If I had a nickel for everyone who said I can't get to level 3, I'd have many nickels and a better headset. This is a reason to solve that problem, because to get to a personalized experience, we have to be measuring the experience of learning more effectively. The last reason that we should be thinking about learning technology is to foster equity. And this is actually probably my most important point that I'm going to make. I love this picture. I don't know if you've seen this picture before, but the difference between an equal experience and an equitable experience, right? And this almost perfectly explains learning technology to me when it comes to a lot of organizations, especially when we rely on one tool to try to solve problems for multiple personas. is that that one tool maybe fits one audience correctly, but we're forcing everyone else to bend and flex or maybe completely miss out on opportunity because we're trying to deliver, or at least coming at it from an equality perspective. Same experience for everyone, despite the differences in their personas. We have to build solutions and think about technology in a way that provides the right experience. And I connect this idea of equity to the skills gap. Have you heard about the skills gap? Hit the react if you've heard about the fact that we have a skills gap. Because I don't think we do. Shock, right? Hot take moment. I don't think there's a skills gap. I think the actual problem is an opportunity gap. It's a cause and effect type situation. There's a lack of consistent opportunity to develop this knowledge and skills people need to do their jobs. And as a result of an extended period of time of not properly prioritizing development in organizations, the skills gap has emerged. So the problem we have to fix is not a skills gap because the skill requirements in our workplace are a moving target. Once you hit it, the skill requirements or priorities are going to change. We have to provide that foundational infrastructure to foster continuous opportunity. And that's everything from how we think about learning and development, how we prioritize learning and development, how we make sure everyone gets an opportunity regardless of where you work, how long you've worked here, how you're performing, fit it into the reality of everyday life, and then leverage technology accordingly. So our technology conversations and the way we think about the digital side of learning is a key factor in closing the opportunity gap that is creating the skills gaps that are causing performance and result challenges within the organizations that we work with today. Hot take, opportunity gap is very large on the slide, therefore it must be very important. So those are the 7 reasons that I believe organizations should be applying learning technology at work. So it is about speed, consistency, and scale, 100%. But we have to add those additional lenses when we're thinking about how we apply technology, when we're making technology selections and decisions. It should be about these 7 ideas, checking these 7 boxes. If your digital strategy can do these 7 things, you're setting yourself up to be able to deal with the next disruption that you may face moving forward and building the right skills. So a question for you, I think I'm almost back on schedule time. We'll see, we'll hang out as long as it takes, right? Where's the biggest opportunity in your digital learning strategy today? So in those 7 boxes I said that we need to check, which one or which ones do you think you're maybe not quite focused on today? You need to take another look at as you go back out of TK and work on your digital strategies. Which ones are really standing out to you? I'll pause for a moment and take a beverage. I see personalization is often winning the day, which is not particularly surprising given the challenge between connecting technology to the right data to feed a personalized experience. I saw someone just put a lot of letters up there. Hopefully this is helping if you have multiple letters in your response. I saw someone just say, sorry, I can't capture the names moving so fast. I saw E, which is a great, you've got focus on the particular area that you need to work on. Awesome. Thanks for the feedback, everybody. Moving on. So our goal when looking at learning and development and technology through the lens of those 7 ideas is to provide an equitable workplace experience for everyone. So everyone gets the training and support they need to do their best work every day. If anyone asked for a mission statement for learning and development, this is what I believe we're supposed to be doing. So now, how do we take our digital perspective and do that? That's what we're going to talk about for the rest of our time together. And to me, it's not just about technology again. So many conversations about technology actually aren't about technology. That's awesome and potentially confusing. For me, it comes down to these 4 different ideas. As we're building a strategy as learning and development teams, we can't just talk about technology in isolation. We have to talk about these 4 ideas in concert to create the right experience for the people we're supporting. Because ultimately, that's what technology is not the solution, right? It's an enabler of an experience that's going to help people do their jobs better. We already talked about personas. All right, it begins with understanding the audience to a degree where we get their day-to-day reality and can take what we do to them. When I work in retail, we talk a lot about bringing learning into the aisle, right? Because where does a person in a retail store do their job? In the aisle, behind the counter, at the cash register, or a mix between. When do they go to the manager's office to access the computer where the training is? Never. So our strategy can't be based in that back office. Our strategy has to be based where people do their work. That's to get to that level, that's where personas come in. The second piece is understanding the priorities of our business. We can't make a technology decision until we understand what the organization and our stakeholders are going to expect people to be able to do. So over the next 3 to 5 years, it's obviously going to change, but over the next 3 to 5 years, where is our business going? And how does that then inform the knowledge and skill requirements of the people that we're going to support, the personas that we're working with, and then backing into, well, to help people develop those knowledge and skills and support the right personas, how do we then make informed decisions when it comes to technology and content? Because if we don't understand priorities, we're just providing learning content for the sake of learning content. If we don't understand the persona, we're not meeting anyone's individual needs. Persona, priorities, then technology before we get to content. Technology is step 3. And the reality is there is no one ring to rule them all. And I'm a technology provider, and I'm saying that. So the reality is that it is unlikely that, especially if you work in a large dynamic enterprise, that one system is going to provide the entire experience that you're looking for. And like I said earlier, to help people learn and do their jobs better, it doesn't have to be called a learning technology. So when I say there's no one ring, I'm talking about the entire ecosystem, not just the platform that maybe L&D administers. So I'm curious, it's time for a guessing game. How many learning technologies do you think the average enterprise has, according to research from RedThread? I shared that in a link earlier too. I'll drop it at the end of our conversation as well. How many systems does the average enterprise, and think about big companies potentially, use, according to research from 2019 from RedThread? Throw a number in the chat. I'm curious to see what you say. But I'm curious to know where Barbara works, because she said 100 plus, 300. I'm not going to say I haven't seen it, but it's not the average number. It is lower. We're closer in the general conversation. I don't know if I've seen the actual number hit, because people like intervals of 5. Although someone did say 21. That's a very specific guess. The answer is 11. So the average organization at an enterprise scale is using 11 different technologies. If you're a really big company, have merged with a lot of other companies, I have seen organizations out there with 40 different learning management systems trying to figure out how do we make sense of all of this. And like I said, the reality is you're likely going to use multiple tools to help provide this right fit experience. So what our job is to not lean away from that, not try to find one tool that literally does everything. And I've read a lot of requests for proposals and information in my time, and I've seen kitchen sinks of a platform must have literally every feature I've ever heard of. That doesn't exist. But instead, what we should be looking at is how do we make sure that all of the tools that we're using have a clear purpose and deliver a clear value based on how we're applying them. And I come back to my phone as the example for this, because when you think about the apps that are on your phone, why are they there? And why do you keep them there? Because you downloaded it and use it for a particular purpose, and you keep it because it's providing a particular value. Unfortunately, at work, we all don't get to make those decisions about the tools that we use. So instead, we have to make sure it's clear to the people who are using, or we are asking to use the technologies we provide. Why should I use this? What's the value I get from it? And how do I use it? What's the purpose? Because when people, as just a rough example, have video provided to them with updated information via email, via Drive, via SharePoint, via the learning management system, via Teams, via this, via that, how do I as an employee understand where I'm supposed to go for what? And this is one of the biggest challenges. You may have 11 great systems, and you understand them because you're a learning and development professional. You're really good at this. But as an employee in this organization, it's not my job to figure out how you're using your technology. How do we make sure each individual we're working with understands, why would I go to these different systems, even if they have overlapping functions? So here's how I help organizations work through this. It's called a persona-based learning ecosystem design. It's very snappy. I don't have an anagram for that yet. I'll work on that. And the idea here is, instead of coming at it from a feature perspective, right? Instead of saying my learning platform must have the following 400 buttons. Instead, we're going to connect the dots between digital capability and the experience that we're trying to provide for the different audiences or personas that we support. And the way I tackle this is I come at it from a layered perspective. I do a lot of things in layers professionally. It's probably because I'm not a very good visual designer. Lines and blocks are easy. So the 4 different layers we're going to tackle are the data layer, the capability layer, the digital layer, and the experience layer. So I'm going to explain what each one is. The integrated data layer at the foundation just means what are we going to have to measure and how are we going to measure that data? How is data going to inform our strategy, right? We need completions. We need to track the regulatory information, right? People need to know people did the training. But what other types of data are we going to need to track that's going to help inform the way we select technologies and apply technology? Next layer up is capabilities. What are we going to need our technology to be able to do? This is the buttons. So I'm going to need reinforcement capability. I want adaptive learning. I want content management capability. I need authoring capability. I want a knowledge sharing collaboration area, right? This is what we need technology to be able to do. We haven't talked about specific platforms yet. This is just broadly what we want tech to do. The next layer is the tools that will do that. So these are the actual systems. So if you have an LMS, learning experience platform, micro-learning tool, virtual reality tool or augmented reality, authoring tool, the full tool set is in our digital layer. Then there's the experience layer. This is where we take each persona and we identify how they're going to access the different solutions we provide, what types of activities they're going to engage with through technology, and where the content is coming from, which is another key consideration, right? Because if you're going to be using a lot of third-party content, you're going to be curating content from across the internet, that's different than if you're building content internally. So those are the layers that I work through with organizations. But the idea here is not to go from the bottom up. It's actually the top down, or we start at the top, not you don't go down. So the idea here is you identify their personas first, and the key consideration around what access, what are the devices we're using, right? Are we using Zebra devices, handheld devices in the aisle of a retail store? Are we using personal devices? Are they allowed to use personal devices? Are we using company-issued laptops, right? What does that look like, the device side? What activities do we need people to be able to engage with to make learning part of work? Where's the content feed going to come from? And then we start asking, okay, what data do we need to capture? What capabilities do I need to bring that experience design to life? What do the buttons need to be able to do? And then what are the right tools to connect the dots between capability and experience? Can I do this with one system? If you can, hats off, cheers, accomplishment, right? Because for some audiences, maybe the answer is one particular digital system. In some audiences, it may be multiple tools. They're going to work together in order to create the experience. So instead of, and what I urge people to do, especially if you're looking at your technology stack, and I know a lot of organizations right now are taking a bit of a step back, like we talked about at the beginning, and saying, okay, what have we learned? Maybe how do we consolidate? We have all of these tools. We maybe launched a bunch of tools in the last 2 years just to get things going because we had to. Okay, what do we have? What do we actually need? And how are we going to move forward with our technology strategy? This is what I'm urging people to do rather than just list out features and get the tool with the most features, because you're going to likely miss parts of the experience that you're actually trying to provide. So hopefully that made sense in some way. Glad you're still here. So what does this look like in practice at a very high level? Because it's going to be different for every organization. It's impossible for me to say, this is what you need, because I don't know your life. I don't know the audience you're trying to support. I don't know what tools you have, but hopefully you get the kind of overarching idea of how to look at this. And afterwards, if you have particular questions after we're done today, happy to chat. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me more effectively in conversation, or just email me. We don't have to talk. You don't want to talk to me. But here's an example. So we have 2 people working in the same company. One's a corporate employee working in a hybrid role, doing some work from home, doing some work from the office. Another one's a retail worker. You've seen these gentlemen before. So how do we look at building a persona-based experience for these individuals? Well, we have our back-end systems, right? So we're going to have places where we're going to store content, we're going to collect data, but those are maybe not necessarily part of the experience that the individual employee sees. So maybe we have an LMS, a validated system of record on the back end. We have a data warehouse back there. The employees actually don't need to think about those systems in this example. But then forward-facing, they actually access their digital learning experiences through 2 different avenues. Because when we look at the corporate persona, we identify that the productivity tools they use to do their job every day, let's just call it Microsoft Teams, is a tool that's the primary access point. That's where we need to live and where we need to create solutions to make them accessible as part of the working experience every day. So for the corporate employee, that is the experience we're going to shape around their productivity tools, not try to force them to come to a different system, click another button, because it's unlikely they will. The frontline employee is actually going to use a dedicated learning system because they don't use Microsoft Teams, right? They're doing their work in a very different way every day. So we need a dedicated platform that's built for their experience so they, in the moments they have every day, can get access to the right resources or search for the right tools. However, in between, we're going to use the same knowledge base. So they're going to maybe have the same intranet, that their different tools, the one gentleman's laptop, another gentleman's using a handheld device. Both tools are able to go to the same place if they want to look up information about their benefits packages, new announcements from the company, the latest priorities we're working on. So the shared knowledge base is going to be leveraged because it fits in this hypothetical example, both experiences. But then the learning experience platform might be provided for the corporate employee because they have the opportunity to search, right? They have time to kind of build a professional development plan, hang out with people like us at a webinar. But that digital experience doesn't fit, in this case, the frontline employee. We're not going to not provide that person opportunity. We're going to leverage their core system to provide career development opportunity instead of introducing another tool that doesn't match their reality. So hopefully, again, at a very high generic level, that makes a bit of sense. But it comes down to making sure that each tool each individual is going to use has a clear purpose. Why am I using these tools? And provides a clear value based on what they're trying to achieve in doing their best work every day. And it's this kind of design, the way that we're thinking about and applying technology today, that helps me overcome a lot of the challenges we see in organizations to drive engagement. So I see in the types of organizations I work with, on average, about 83% of employees engaging in digital learning experiences on average 2 to 3 times per week. How do I do that? The answer is not magic. The answer is applying the mindset and the approach that I've been talking about for 40-ish minutes in order to overcome a lot of the obstacles we see when it comes to driving digital learning engagement. And it all comes down to understanding the audience and using the right tools to craft the right experience around that individual to help make learning a meaningful part of work. So we have about 15 minutes left. I'm going to move through a couple key points and then hopefully have some time to answer some questions. And then, like I said, I'll drop some additional links. If you have any questions I don't get to today, how does any of this apply to me? I'm always happy to chat after our time together. Again, thanks for still hanging out with me. You're hanging on. I like it. So a couple questions I hear a lot are, one, how do you measure the value of technology, right? How do you know if your technology is working, right? We talk about measuring the value of learning in a lot of cases, but usually that's about the program. It's more about the content, the experience. How do you measure the value of tech so you know you're getting the right value out of the investment? Because technology is not cheap in any regard, right? You get what you pay for. So here are a couple different factors that I add in to how you should be looking at measuring the value of tech. It's not just about are people using it, but that is a big piece, right? Are people using the tool with the intended frequency? Is it playing a key role, right? When you're driving impact within the organization, is using the certain tools that you use a critical part of being able to reach that audience and deliver those solutions? Do people like it? That's part of the equation. It's not all of the equation, but do they hate using this tool or do they actually enjoy using that technology? We have to consider sentiment. Does the tool strengthen the overall ecosystem? If you're using maybe a learning experience platform, does it actually make your LMS better? Right? Is your LMS able to do what it's meant to do or really leverage its strengths because you're moving part of the experience to another tool and together they shape a stronger experience that gets you better value than they would have alone? Does working with the tool, working with your digital partners actually make you better at your job? That's one of the things I always urge when people are looking at different technology providers is it's not just about the technology that you're acquiring, it's about the experience of learning from people who have years potentially of experience applying these types of solutions in different organizations. I know I spent 10 years at Disney and 6 years at Kaplan, and I got very siloed in a lot of cases to how we did things here. So leveraging my technology partners helped me understand how other organizations are solving particular challenges. So it's taking these different factors and then comparing to the investment, not just the money that it costs to buy a piece of technology, the time and effort that's required to maintain, to build out all the other factors that come into leveraging a technology in an enterprise. How do these two factors compare and are you getting the right value for your overall investment? Integrations. Someone might have asked in the chat somewhere, it's been moving very quickly. how does technology, or how do integrations play in to the way that we make decisions, especially if we're using multiple tools? And the reality is integrations is a challenging conversation, because when you think about what could we integrate, there's a lot. Everything from the kind of basic single sign-on authentication, user provisioning side, connecting your learning system to your HR system. That's kind of a common basic integration. But then everything from content integrations, recognition system integrations, there's a whole variety of things we could plug together to create this kind of overarching experience. But you also have to think about the effort required. Do you have the IT resources to build out the right integrations? What integrations are offered by your provider out of the box? Do they work? How do you maintain? Because an integration built today, if one of those systems changes, will it work next year? Bunch of factors to consider. So when I talk about integrations, I use two different ideas. One, there's strategic integration. When I worked at Kaplan, I had an LMS, I had a microlearning platform, I had Adobe Connect for virtual classrooms, I had a knowledge management system and a wiki, I had at least 10 different tools. None of them talk to each other, but they were strategically integrated, which meant there was a clear purpose on how we used each tool. That purpose was conveyed from our team, we maintained that purpose, and then echoed to the people who were using the tool on the other side. So people knew, why do I go to each system? And we made it as easy as possible to get to the right pieces of each system through links and different other strategies, because we didn't have the tools and the resources to formally integrate from a technical perspective, so we strategically integrated the systems. When you do want to look at technical integration, make sure you're thinking about the value that technical integration provides, given the effort and potential expense required to make that happen. And then one more question that I often hear is, should we buy something or should we build something? Right? You might be thinking about, or maybe you have built out a homegrown learning management system. You may be looking to replace that and considering, should we continue to build versus acquiring something from a third-party provider? So I kind of nudge people to think about the following checklist of items, that if you're building a technology, you can build what you want, right? So you get the functionality you need to support the personas you're working with. It might come with a lower startup cost, especially if you have technical resources. If you work at Google, you have a lot of digital resources. If you don't work at Google, you might not have the same kind of resources. But when you're building your own, you're the only person who's used it. So you don't know exactly what your capabilities are going to turn into. You have to continue to build out and maintain as the technology infrastructure changes. You don't have anyone there to help you because you're doing this on your own. And how much time are you going to spend focusing on innovating your technology, keeping pace with overall digital innovation that's happening around you versus executing? And I know in my experience, we tend to get focused on solving the problems, putting out the fires, versus thinking about how do we evolve technology. You're at a technology conference right now, so you're thinking about it. But how much time do you get every year to think about that? On the buy side, you know what it does because it's being used elsewhere. Someone else is handling the maintenance side. Someone is an expert at running that particular tool. And hopefully, they're continuing to iterate their technology. That's a big hopefully, because some providers are better at that than others moving forward. But you're getting their tool, which maybe has customization, but it's not necessarily going to be exactly what you're looking for in a lot of cases. And it may be more expensive, especially upfront from an implementation perspective, right? The IT resources required to shift technology in and maybe move other technology out. So there's clear pros and cons in both directions, but I urge you, if you're thinking about this comparison, to kind of weigh those factors and decide what's ultimately best for you when it comes to building or buying technology. So to wrap up with 10 minutes left, overall, like I said earlier, what's the mission? What are we trying to do? Why are we here talking about digital learning? Very exciting topic. Employees need and deserve a right fit experience so that they can build the knowledge and skill they need to be ready for what comes next. That's our goal. That's what we should be trying to accomplish as talent development professionals. The question is then, how do we leverage the best of what technology can provide? And again, not just the foundations of what we've done, not just e-learning and the learning management system, but the broader picture of what the digital ecosystem can help us do to meet that goal. And for me, it comes down to looking at technology through this lens, these 7 different boxes we need to check, because this is frankly the digital experience people get in their everyday lives. It's not just about accessing information faster and getting access to information at scale. It's about a personal experience that fits into my everyday life, that allows me to have an equitable opportunity to answer the same questions or solve the same problems that someone else can, and connect with people who are maybe facing similar challenges. So that's how I believe we need to look at learning technology to really craft the right face as we face forward digitally with the organizations we work with, because now, especially over the past 2 years, as you've seen, technology has truly become the face of learning and development. So as I said earlier, I've got more links I'll drop. So as we jump into Q&A, if they're, let's see, going to Notepad, like I said, the slides are available here. If any of those visuals were particularly helpful, feel free to grab those. If you want to check out the hype cycle that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation, that's there. The Red Thread Research Report, which has some fun, interesting examples of different technology ecosystems, how different tools are being used, is right there. I quoted the ATD State of the Industry Report, which is right there. One of the things that I miss from TK in person, the last event I actually spoke at in person was TK in 2020, is the hallway conversations where we get to chat about like how any of this relates to you. I love to have that conversation. There's my LinkedIn profile. We should all connect and be friends. But with that said, 8 minutes left. I'd love to see what questions you have, hang out and riff a bit more. So I'm going to jump over to the Q&A area, see what's upvoted. If you didn't add a question, jump over to Q&A, upvote the ones you like, or, oh, I would have asked that question. Throw that up there and add any additional questions, and I'll move as quickly as I can to see what we've got going on here. Question 1 from Spencer. Can you provide an example of what a disruption-ready team looks like? Yes, I can. Their name is the Briscoe Group, so I'm getting really specific. It's actually a retailer in New Zealand, and they're one of my favorite stories of how organizations have overcome challenges that they face over the past 2 years, especially in the lockdowns that have experienced in New Zealand. They support a retail audience that's distributed across a variety of stores. There's a story about them on the Axonify website. If you go to axonify.com, look under the stories for Briscoe Group, you'll find them there. But why I love their story is because they didn't become disruption ready while disruption was taking place. They had invested in the experience they were providing to their frontline workers in the years leading up to 2020. And they had done things like saying, well, you know, communicating via team huddles and bulletin boards doesn't make sense in a digital world. Let's take a look at the experience that employees need. Let's introduce a digital solution that gets people information more quickly. Right? So they were solving problems or improving the experience of being an employee and getting access to information and training. And then when the disruption hit, they found themselves more ready to solve those problems because they had been improving the experience iteratively along the way. So what does that look like? For me, it comes down to really taking a hard look at the experience that people are facing day to day and asking questions like, how do we get people the right information? How do we make sure people have access to training that's going to help them do their jobs? How do we craft a personal experience? Because making those investments today will pay off as you face challenges you don't know are coming moving forward. So I love the Briscoe Group's example. Kimberly asked, I find that what I want to do, the technology hasn't caught up yet. Are you doing holograms and a holodeck technology? For our LMS, I'm getting answers like, we don't have that capability yet, but we hope it to in the future. It's really frustrating. I completely agree that that particular answer is extremely frustrating. We hope to in the future is not a roadmap. So like I said, there's a gap between enterprise technology and consumer technology. And it's less a question of what providers are capable of, and it's more a question of what they're willing to do. And I can bluntly say that learning technology providers will build what you need them to build. So it's really on the users of technology to push pressure back onto the providers of technology to push us in the direction you need us to go to provide the experience and the results you're trying to see as an organization. And so that we can work together to figure out what that solution is. Because you may say, I need a green button, and my experience working with different organizations may say it should be a red button, and we need to work together to figure out what the actual solution should be. 100% agree that that's a challenge. How do you solve for that? Like I said, the first place I would go, and where I've gone in the past before I was in tech, was I looked beyond my learning technology. I tried to bend and flex my LMS so many different ways to just solve kind of how do people access information problem, and I couldn't. So I implemented a different system. I implemented a wiki that was already in the company. So I would suggest if your technology partners in learning aren't getting you the results and you're kind of stuck maybe contractually in that relationship, look at the broader ecosystem and say, are there other tools we could be leveraging to close gaps in the experience while our technology hopefully catches up. Hopefully that was helpful at all. Can you provide, oh, I already answered that one. Robert, how do we scale learning development if we are trying to be so specific with our personas? So the key there is for me, I work with some organizations that have thousands of job titles and job codes, right? If you try to craft an experience for each individual job or each individual department, it's not going to work. You don't have the resources to do that. But when you start with a persona-based approach and you say, what are the day-to-day realities of the people we're supporting? What are those realities? And we craft an experience around that. You may find that thousands of job codes come down to 12 personas, as an example. One organization, that was the number. So let's take people who work in a warehouse and people who work in a retail store. They do very different jobs. But when you actually break down their day-to-day working realities, they share a lot in common from a persona perspective. So instead of taking the departmental, the divisional, the job approach, take the persona approach and find where the commonalities are. At the end of the day, I'm not saying you can provide a perfect experience for every audience. You're likely going to have to make decisions and shift priorities. But how do you find those commonalities that inform what a better experience could be for these particular audiences, rather than just say everyone gets the same thing? Because even if you can get a little bit better, then everyone gets the same thing, which means no one gets the right thing. I think we're moving in the right direction. Hopefully technology will get better and better to help solve those personalization problems. See, 2 minutes left. How do you put content on the phone where the company wants all content behind a firewall, but do not issue phones to all employees? 100% a challenge. And that's where working with HR, working with legal, working with compliance and IT is going to establish what the barriers are. I work with a lot of organizations that say just no to BYOD strategies. That is not allowed because we're afraid that people are going to access information off the clock if people are hourly, or they're going to access information and use it in a particular way. So what we try to do is we find, are there guardrails we can put in place? So as an example, you may install your learning system may be able to gate access to the company Wi-Fi. So yes, you can use your own device to access work information and training, but you can only do it when you're on the store Wi-Fi. Or you can only do it when you're clocked in for your shift. So are there particular ways that you can make it a more appealing opportunity? Because mitigating the device maintenance and distribution side by using BYOD is often an attractive opportunity for a lot of teams, but you have to overcome some hurdles. And then there are some organizations where the answer is still just no. And then we look elsewhere and say, well, what are the other devices we could use, and find as close as we can. Maybe we can't get to the personal device, or maybe not yet. But there are different ways to overcome that challenge that maybe lighten up some of the no's that you often see when it comes to BYOD. Last question, as we're about to run out of time. Do you have a worksheet of questions to start this conversation to zero in on the right tools for the right training content? I don't yet, but that's a great suggestion. If you download the presentation, there's more text on a lot of the slides that explain what was he talking about in this particular area. So start there. If there are any particular questions or a particular need that you would like me to provide, or if you want me to build a particular worksheet that would help, feel free to reach out. I'm throwing my email in the chat. Contact me anytime. I'm happy to help. Happy to help this make more sense for the challenges that you're trying to overcome. And again, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed TK. If I didn't get to your question, email me. I will answer every question that gets sent my way, I promise. So sorry for that technical snafu at the beginning. Glad you hung around. Hope you enjoyed the session, and enjoy the rest of TK, and hope to see you again sometime, maybe even in person. Bye, everybody.